Hello guys, welcome to today's video, and in today's video we are going to discuss about a topic which has been talk and plot of many of the popular books as well as movies, and which has fascinated all of us equally at certain point of time in our lives. So in today's video we are going to discuss about the one of the most powerful organized crime groups in the world, and how the group at least ruled 50% of drug trade around the world, and it is based on United States of America, a country which has a very strong federal laws. Everybody knows that it's the world leader and all. So how crime groups functions from there, and is one of the most powerful crime groups that ever have been existed. So in today's video we will basically go through their journey, that how some of the Sicilian migrant workers, Sicily is a small place in Italy, so from there they came some small migrant workers from Sicily, Italy, how they came into America and turned into one of the most powerful organized crime groups, one of the most powerful organized crime empires that have ever existed. So let's begin. This is early 19th century's New York, which is bustling with opportunities as much as with migrant workers. The early 19th century kind of saw a horde of migrant workers coming from different countries and regions and settling into United States of America in search of better economic conditions and better earning opportunities. Among such group was the Sicilian people, or Sicily is a small town in Italy. So from there came the Sicilian migrants. These were basically poor peasants or workers who had come from Sicily in looking for better opportunities and economic conditions to America. But along with this people came the Sicilian Mafia, or the criminals from there, who also came from there to avoid law but also in search of better opportunities. And these people in future course of events and turn of events transform into one of the biggest organized crime criminal group, which is known as the New York Five Families. So these people who came from Sicily uh, started to settle in the different areas of New York. Mainly, they were settling in New York's East Harlem, or Italian Harlem as it's known, and the Lower East Side, as well as Brooklyn, and some in North Eastern United States, as well as metropolitan areas such as Chicago and New Orleans. So these migrants who came from the Sicily settled into different parts of New York as well as some other cities. So like this will in future help them to consolidate power, as we will see in future course of events. So as the Sicilian people or the Italian people started to settle in their neighborhoods, they formed their own neighborhoods, and certain people started living in these areas. So, but there was not always lots of opportunities for these people. These were poor migrants from Italy, and they didn't have much of the education. They didn't speak the language. So many of them, or much of the criminal-minded people who had come from there, who were already criminal in Sicily or Italy, who were already gang members, came from there, and they kind of started doing criminal activities here. So they were first involved in petty theft, then they started for robbery, and then there were murders. So slowly, the like many of the gangs were formed of these migrant workers, and they started doing these criminal activities. So still, but there was not such a consolidated organized crime group. There were lots of gangs, and they were running their own activities around these areas mainly, and earning their share of what they could earn through it, and doing their share of terror what they could do through it. And these groups in collectively were known as the mob, the as we call the term mafia. So in America at that time they were known as the mob. But as now I told you that these groups were distributed into small gangs, and formed, like, you if you came from a particular town, you have a certain gang, or certain people come together and form a gang. So these were small fragmented gangs. They were not organized crime groups. They were not cooperating with each other. So what was happening, that nothing was happening on a larger scale, because they were small gangs. They could do small stuff, but there was not such a big organized crime group coming across. But in 1930 something happened that changed the history of crime forever. In 1930 something happened that will ultimately lead to formation of five families and formation of one of the most powerful organized crime groups in the world. In 1930s, the Castle Mary's War happened. The Castle Mary's War was a bloody power struggle for the control of American Mafia between one of the two main gangs that were running at that time. One was headed by the boss, the Joe Masseria, and the other was headed by Salvatore Maranazzo. So these were two criminal, gangs, and like they were one of the, two of the most powerful gangs among the gangs. And then they had a power struggle to control like the whole of this mafia thing. So in 1930, this power struggle happened, and it led to numerous of the murders at the time. New York police and like the papers were all filled with like there is another death, there is another. So there was total of bloodbath. Both of the gangs jumped on each other. There were shootouts. There were anything to be done to stop each other was done, and it was one of the bloodiest power struggle American mafia has ever seen, and is still believed to be. Like after that, nothing of that sort ever happened. It was so much of bloodbath, and in eventual turn of events, the Maranozzo faction came as winner, and the Joe Masseria, the boss himself, was killed, and thus the Salvatore Maranozzo group came to be known as the winner of this war. And ultimately, Salvatore Maranozzo himself, became one of the most powerful gangsters at that time in the history. Like he became the undisputed king. There was no one to go against him after killing of Joe Masseria. So from here we start seeing the consolidation of power. After he became after Salvatore Maranello became winner of this war, he regained the control of Italian American gangs in the city. Now you all come under me, like we are a group. So it happened like that way, and he formed them into families. Like we mostly see mafia forming gangs, but the Italian mafia called their gangs as families, and they were based on the people. Like supposedly uh, Joe Maranazzo, Salvatore Maranazzo formed his Maranazzo family. Similarly, other five families were formed: Maranazzo, Profesi, Mangano, Luciano, and Gagliano families. So these families were formed respectively at that time to gain the control. Now the power was consolidated. These families will rule their respective areas, and no one will trouble each other. Like it was an unspoken agreement, and no one will inform or do anything against each other. So now they are a consolidated, powerful group. So this is how Maranazzo became the boss of all bosses after declaring these five families. These are the five families, and they are going to rule certain areas of New York. They are going to have their certain areas, and this is our criminal consolidated network. Maranazzo declared himself as Capo di Tutti, or as known, it is in Italian for boss of all the bosses. So he was like, these are the five families. They control all the crime, and I am the boss of all the bosses. But in the meantime, the person who had helped Maranozzo to took down Joe Masseria, the boss himself, means one of the most powerful members of the Salvatore Maranozzo gang was Lucky Luciano. And Lucky Luciano thought for long term, and he thought that Salvatore Maranozzo is a greedy person, and ultimately he will again lead to their decline and will be a hindrance in business, and was more greedy than the previous people or even the Joe Masseria himself. So ultimately, Salvatore Maranozzo's person who helped him to win the Castelmaris war, Lucky Luciano, ultimately was the reason for his own downfall. And then Lucky Luciano eventually was able to get Salvatore Maranozzo killed. And after Salvatore Maranozzo was killed, now, as Salvatore Maranazzo was killed and was killed by Lucky Luciano, so Charles Luciano now had an option after killing Salvatore Maranazzo that he himself could become boss of all the bosses. But as I told you, that he thought of long term, and somewhere in his mind he realized that if today I become boss of all bosses, then someone will rise and take me down again, because nobody in this crime groups could accept the authority. There can no be boss of bosses. So he played a very smart move, which is one of the I believe one of the core reasons that American Mafia is standing still today. That he formed a commission. Yes, the American Mafia group was at that time known as the Commission or the Syndicate. So in this commission, they consisted all the members, like the all the heads of the five families, as well as some other prominent crime groups like the Chicago crime group's boss Al Capone. So like this, they formed a commission. Now there is no boss of bosses. Whatever decision this commission will take, they will have to follow. Like supposedly there are five families. If one family is doing something wrong, second one comes and talk about that in their this group, and whatever the group decides, whatever the commission decides, that will happen. So this eliminated all the chances of bad blood. Now there is a commission, and there is five families, you sit together and you decide. So this led to formation of one of the most powerful organized crime groups. Plus now this group was formed, like this Sicilians has already had the code of Omerta, but now in this five families, this was mostly like this was the main thing, which was Omerta as pronounced in Italian, and which means which was a code that you first never rat on your friends. Matlab, you never give information or anything to cops or any other police department regarding what, even if you are caught, you are about to be killed, whatever, you reveal no information. And the second rule which I found on Google is always keep your mouth shut. Matlab, you never have to forget the first rule, and that is that whatever happens, you are not going to give away what you are doing among the mafia to anybody else. You don't have to tell that to anybody, whatever happens. And if you did that, the only thing that is was going to happen to it, that they will kill you. Your own people are going to kill you if you reveal that. So with this code, with this structure, they ultimately, the mob, or they also were known as Cosa Nostra. Cosa Nostra is an Italian term of for our uh, our own thing. So basically, they formed a group with a identity. As you see now, they have a commission with a core group of principles, which I told you is Omerta. Whatever happens, you do not give each other's information or anything to other, like to police department, or that you don't snitch on your friends. Whatever happens, with this core principles, with this commission, now the New York crime families were, you know, and now they were regrouped and formed into five families, which were Genovese crime family, Bonanno crime family, Colombo crime family, Gambino crime family, and Lucchese crime family. So these were the five families which were ultimately formed and were going to rule the New York crime mafia, or now the mafia. So as now you see, they settled all the bloodbath that were happening, they formed the organization, they laid the principles. So now all things were sorted, regions were sorted. This is this family's region, this is this family's region. You do your crime here, you take your money from there, and you do not interfere, as well as if required, help each other. Now they had a common pool. So now, as you see, everything is settled. Now their sole focus after later 1930s, and after 1935, 1936, was to earn the maximum amount of money they can earn from their criminal activities. So now the mafia started slowly getting into the things which could earn them money. They slowly got into the labor unions. They became friends with the politicians. They went for various industries, including entertainment, construction, and waste disposal, even waste disposal. So slowly they started increasing their criminal activities, such as loan sharking, gambling, and then they came into prostitution. So every illegal activity this group could do, had started doing. And now the whole aim of existence of there was to make as much as money they can. uh, yeah, so one of the examples of this is they're gaining control over the garbage disposal system. Yes, so the garbage disposal system, the garbage disposal contracts which is given by government to certain people, like who is going to apply, he will get that. So they got into that, they rigged those contracts, and always managed to get their people this contract. So slowly they got into the system basically, and they were trying to make as much as money, like from drugs, from prostitution, you name it, any illegal activity, they were doing it. And it was well known at that time that they had corrupt cops on their payroll, in like and they had the politicians on their payroll who were speaking for them, they had lawyers. So slowly they gain control of the system, they gain control of the finance, which is one of the finance is main thing for running anything. Either it is a crime, or it is a ethical business. If you don't have money, you can't run anything for long. So they slowly got hold of the finance, and they whole aim of their shifted from bloodbath and this thing to was to take maximum amount of money they can make. And slowly American mafia became one of the most powerful crime groups in the world. They started controlling 50% of the drug trade. They were in the entertainment in the Hollywood. They were controlling labor unions in America. They wielded power to politicians. So basically 19 like before 1960s, 1940s to 19 before 1970s was a magical era of mafia. They were making money, like they were fully dipped in money and gold. And this was their era. They had they had numerous casinos, hotels on their name, and everything happening. The movies you see about mafia's affluent lifestyle is basically based on that time when they had control, and they were running their businesses. So this was the time that mafia reached at its peak in America. But as you know, nothing lasts for long. So neither do criminal empires. So by early 1970s, the American people, police, and everybody was fed up with mafia. Everybody knew they controlled everything. You couldn't get them convicted; they will get out. So in early 1970s, or as I should say, in 1970 itself, Congress passed RICO Act, RICO Act, which was known as Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, which was basically whose whole aim was to control mafia's activities. Mafia could not be convicted because the laws that were there would not will be able to put them in jail for what their activities were there, because there was no such act. And they mafia played very smartly. They were not directly involved. But after introducing RICO Act, which was a very stringent act, the mafia's downfall began. So eventually, FBI and other police organizations started taking on mafia, and now they could be convicted because the RICO Act. And then slowly, the mafia groups were, becoming weak because the police and the law was catching up with them. And slowly, the mafia's peak was declining. One such example is John Gotti, who was one of the most powerful crime family's boss, was eventually arrested, And so, after, like this, slowly, the main people were being getting arrested, though they were running their empires from jail itself. But eventually it became hard for the mafia itself, and the rise and the glory it had eventually declined after 1970s. And in coming into modern times, the people even after that believed that mafia has ended. So this was their story. But now the question is the mafia has ended, like they do not exist? So this is very much of a false perception to believe, if you want to, because mafia is very much there. There are still certain killings being done on the name of mafia. There are still being rackets being run. There is still being loan sharking done. And eventually, as the press reports and even the media reports now state, that mafia has ultimately gone to underground style. Today is not 1970s generation. We have social media. You do a certain thing, if a person puts out a phone and records you on camera, you are gone. So mafia has gone on more underground style. Now they don't, publicly, like they used to do in early 1950s or 40s, taking out guns, shooting people, or using baseball bat to kill people on the streets, to put the terror. So now they have gone from that to a subtler version, where you might just receive a call, or a very uh, another way of threatening you, but very subtle. But they still do exist. And nobody does know actually how much of the world of the crime they control still. But it is still believed they have much, like those crime families still have much of the crime of the New York and America and drug trade under their control. So guys, this was the video, and I hope you liked it.